you've probably chatted with an AI and just been floored. How is it doing that? Large language models, or LLMs, they can write poetry, they can debug code, they can carry on a pretty convincing conversation. Honestly, it feels like magic. But today, we're going to pull back the curtain.
You know, this dream of making something inanimate and then having a conversation with it, it's a super old human story. You see it everywhere, in ancient myths like Pygmalion falling for his own statue, in classic novels like Frankenstein, and even in art legends. The story goes that when Michelangelo finished his sculpture of Moses, he was so stunned by how real it looked, he actually tapped its knee and yelled, "Speak!" And this quote from Agatha Christie, it just fits perfectly here. She's talking about how we humans have this vast web of knowledge inside us that we're not even aware of. And as we're about to see, the exact same thing is kind of true for the artificial minds we're building right now.
So, that ancient dream? It's not a dream anymore. It's a reality, sitting on our desktops and in our phones. We finally have our talking creations. But that brings us to the real question we're tackling in this explainer. Do we really get what's going on inside that black box?
Okay, let's get right into it. The so-called magic of these incredibly complicated systems, well, it actually boils down to a surprisingly simple core idea. It's not about thinking or understanding like a person. It's about probability.
At its absolute core, an LLM is a next word prediction engine. That's it. That's the secret. It has been trained to do one single task, but billions and billions of times. Look at a string of text and figure out the most probable next word. So if you give it this phrase, it digs through all the patterns it's ever learned to make an incredibly educated guess about what comes next.
And here's where it gets wild. Just from learning to do that one simple thing, the model starts to soak up an unbelievable amount of information about the world. It learns facts, like who wrote which book. It learns about language itself, that enormous is just a more intense version of big. It can even pick up on mathematical concepts. But, and this is so important, it also learns every pattern in the data, including the ones we'd rather it didn't. If the texts it reads tend to say, the professor, he, the model learns that bias as a statistical fact.
So, if the main job is that simple, what makes the final result so incredibly powerful? Well, the answer is scale. It's all about the sheer, mind-boggling amount of information it learns from.
Just think about how a kid's vocabulary explodes. They don't sit down with a dictionary all day. They learn new words from context by hearing them and seeing them in books. An LLM works on the exact same principle. But instead of reading a few books a week, it's like it's reading a huge chunk of the entire internet all at once.
This giant learning phase has an official name. It's called pre-training, and it's what we call a self-supervised process. That just means no one is sitting there spoon-feeding it facts or grammar rules. The model learns all on its own simply by being given trillions of words of text and being told predict the next word over and over and over again. The text itself is the teacher.
And this gives you a sense of what that unimaginable scale really looks like. This is a map of just one dataset called the pile. And as you can see, it is everything. We're talking academic papers, medical journals, computer code, all of Wikipedia, books, and just massive, massive scrapes of the general web. The model is learning from a digital snapshot of all human knowledge and all our chatter.
Okay, so we've got a model that's an expert-level guesser of the next word. How do you turn that into something that can write an email, or a story, or a poem? Let's look at how that prediction engine becomes a generation engine.
Well, it all starts with us. We have to give the model a starting point, an instruction, a question, anything. We call this a prompt. The prompt is the initial context that kicks the whole thing off.
So, how does it actually build a full sentence from there? It's a really simple but clever loop. The model takes our prompt and predicts the most likely next word, all. Then, and here's the key, it just tacks that word onto the end of the input. Now, the new, longer phrase becomes the input. It runs the prediction again, gets the, tacks that on, and just keeps repeating the process. It's basically feeding its own output back to itself, one word at a time, to build a coherent thought.
This whole process of learning from a digital mirror of humanity is what makes these tools so powerful. But it also creates some really deep, sometimes surprising, and often complicated challenges that we absolutely have to grapple with. This slide really lays out the gap between what we might expect from an AI and what's really going on. We want it to be a factual, accurate database, but because it's just predicting probable text, it can spit out plausible-sounding nonsense which we call hallucinations. We want it to be neutral, but
but it just reflects the biases that are already baked into the data it learned from. And yeah, all that data it's trained on, that brings up some very thorny questions about where it came from.
Look, it's really important to get that these aren't just random bugs, they are direct consequences of how LLMs are built. When a model hallucinates, it's because its job is to sound right, not to be right. When it seems biased, it's just echoing the statistical patterns it saw a million times during training. And of course, using huge chunks of the internet for training creates serious debates about copyright. There's even the human side of it. Its ability to mimic conversation is so good, it raises new questions about emotional attachment.
So in the end, these models are just incredibly powerful pattern matching machines, trained on a massive digital reflection of humanity. Our writing, our knowledge, our biases, all of it. So as they get woven more and more into our daily lives, maybe the real question isn't about the machine. Maybe it's about us. When we build something that holds up a mirror to our collective soul, what does it say about us when that reflection has flaws?